we carry on like life in our exploration of the Dhamma. And what a worthwhile life that is. We often forget to count the many blessings which we enjoy, we have in our possession. A human life, the ability to sit without experiencing terrible, excruciating, unbearable pain. We're able to listen, not just hear, but listen, and to try to probe and penetrate what is the meaning of what is being said, spoken in this discourse, this sutta. Because it also matters what it is that we are paying attention to, of course. In this case, the Dhamma of Lord Buddha, which I wouldn't say by some miracles, but with a lot of effort and a lot of great fortune on our part as well. And in the great fortune for the whole planet that we do have the Dhamma still available, which we are paying attention to, pursuing, to try to taste those lessons, the fruits of whatever the Lord Buddha taught. So there's so many things to be truly grateful for, which we don't stop during the day to ask ourselves, am I grateful for this? Am I grateful for that? So this is key when we're living in a world where the tendency is to pull the energy down into darker spaces. No. That is adhamma. That is living contrary to the Dhamma that the Buddha taught. So with that in mind, we carry on today, which happens to be week number or part number 4 of the second discourse of the Digha Nikaya, Sāmaññaphala. And we will continue from the one of the sections of where Lord Buddha mentioned about the 3 trainings. Specifically, we will delve into the jhānas today. And despite what the world of so-called Buddhist meditation has been dabbling into, because just like mindfulness, soon enough, the area of jhanas or the practice of jhanas became the next, as they say in the vernacular, hot potato, the next thing, the next money-making endeavor, even, sadly, whether it's in selling books, etc. But the jhanas are not a fad. They're not things that we dabble with and just to whatever purposes that many people pursue them for. The jhanas have a deep significance in this sasana, in this Dhamma and discipline of Lord Buddha. And I want you to look at them not as attainments as they have been promulgated by several teachers in the last 10, 15 years. Prior to that, they were actually shunned, the jhanas. They were looked down upon as something bad. And then all of a sudden, tables were turned and everybody was teaching the jhana meditations, jhana retreats, promising practitioners higher and higher states of some otherworldly experiences, each in their own, giving it their own flair, but oftentimes far from what the Buddha taught. These are just way stations ultimately. And that does not demean their significance, however. So these are part of samadhi training. The first few weeks we covered the sila portion, and we saw how Lord Buddha was getting into the actual nitty-gritty aspects of what it means to live a virtuous life. Remember, the question that King Ajātasattu asked was, what are the concrete, pragmatic, visible outcomes, fruits of living the true life of a recluse? And Lord Buddha is still answering that question, and he's giving examples, this, and with each one, King Ajātasattu was being asked whether he considers this to be a fruit of the recluse life. And he would say, yes. He had never seen anything like this. There is no guesswork. There is no do it now and hope for the best later. That is not this Dhamma. There is no gamble that we engage in, because immediately we see the outcome. So here we're going to start the Patama jhana. Patama means the first, or part one, in this case, the first jhana. And notice how the Buddha, every single time he mentions, not just him, but all the disciples of Lord Buddha's, especially in terms of the first jhana, they always say seclusion. When you seclude yourself, you automatically taste the impact of the thing that you're pursuing prior to it having really become concretized, become really tasted by you fully. You already are tasting the fruits, the outcome of the initial steps even. Remember, seclusion here does not necessarily will mean only physical seclusion, although it is a big part of it. But bear in mind the other seclusions, meaning seclusion from noise, seclusion from sounds, sights, things that attract you, things that pull you away, because so long as they are there, including your thoughts, so long as they're present in your awareness, the jhana will not be attained. Especially when we're dealing with unwholesome states as well as sensuality. So you cannot attain the jhana without relinquished, given up sensual desire. But without saying so much about it, because I already began talking about the jhana. So again, just to recap, this is Digha Nikaya number 2 from the long discourses, and probably we'll be able to finish it today. I'm not sure, but I don't want to rush. When I need to stop, I will stop. But so today we'll cover the other portion of samadhi section of the training, which are the jhanas. So let's begin. First jhana. So this is Lord Buddha still explaining the benefits, as I said, to King Ajātasattu, who came to him after having gone to so many of the big time teachers of India at the time. The golden era of, if you want to call it that, the founding religious founders of India. And the Buddha, being the youngest among them, was the very last to be visited by King Ajātasattu, who was completely disillusioned and disappointed by all the so-called responses he's gotten from the other so-called teachers, which we've covered, and we saw him show his disgust as to the outcome of what he had seen with their evasion of his question, which was very simple, pragmatic, fruits of reclusehood. Let's begin. Here, great king, while living secluded and removed from sensual desires and unwholesome thoughts, the bhikkhu enters upon and remains in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thinking and pondering, along with joy and pleasure that arise from such seclusion. Further, whatever lingering sensual desires he may have had or perceived in the past, at this point, however, they simply drop away and cease, with only joy and that state of refined happiness remaining in him. Thus he becomes fully percipient of the factual and unmistakable spiritual joy, piti in Pali, as well as the refined pleasure and happiness, which come forth from secluding and training himself in this manner. So, great king, continued explaining the Blessed One, here you have another fruit that brings far more undeniable benefits than the outcomes already mentioned, one that is gained by living the life of a recluse, an immediately visible fruit of recluseship that is observable right here and now. A brief, I guess you could say, footnote that I'll be offering here is, in case this is a term that you're curious about, jhana, which you will see a lot in, as I said, modern day, as well as in the suttas, of course, a lot. It's what you, over time, it developed when it went to, this is hundreds of years later after the Buddha taught, it became used in its Sanskrit version, dhyana, and that later on went into China, and it became Chan, and which ended up going to Korea, from Korea to Japan. It became known as what we normally know of as Zen, which specifically means Zen Buddhism. So it became a method of practice. So the meditation itself became the name of a jhana. So the jhana itself is merely a stage of the meditation practice. Samadhi is the proper term for mental cultivation, specifically collected stability of the mind, not just concentration, although concentration is part of it, but it's the collected stability of the mind. It's constantly deepening, where it reaches its advanced stage when we're at the 7 factors of awakening stage, where it's number 6. So the bojjhanga of samadhi. But the jhanas are part of that process. So they're not necessarily meditation per se. They're aspects of it. These are stages. And remember, as I've said I think in the book, the manual I wrote, these are good for when they are being done right, under the supervision and guidance of a teacher. Not to show off, because that's unfortunately what it has turned into. That's what my reference was earlier today in mentioning jhanas in the world the last 15 years or so. But the jhanas themselves are clues for the teacher to help guide to know, first of all, to where the student is, at what, as I said, way station, at what juncture is the student at, so that the teacher can best remedy, best nudge, help, guide the student. Because remember, the teacher is not going to, a wise teacher is not going to just take it at face value, whatever the student is saying. The student might not be evil-minded or conceited or trying to make up stuff to convince the teacher, yeah, I'm at this level, although many students are and have and will continue to do so, making it more than it is, to look a certain way, to impress, basically lie, falsehood. Even if a student is not engaged in such wrong, akusala behavior, nevertheless, they might present it in a way that, with the best of intentions, they might present it, but while using words, expressions that might not convey the accuracy of the situation, accuracy of what is taking place in the mind. And this is where not every person who speaks on the Dhamma is in fact a teacher or could be a teacher. In the Anguttara Nikaya, Lord Buddha is very clear as to the true qualifications of teachers, of the Dhamma. So, the jhanas help. It's like mapping out for the teacher to help the student, to guide them to the next level, They're not there to pitch your tent and just enjoy and stay there for the rest of your life. That would be really sad. So they're just stepping stones, rungs on a ladder, but very important, each of which, in telling so much about where the student is at that moment, at that stage. Dutiya jhana, second jhana. Next, great king, through the disappearance of both thinking and pondering, he enters upon and remains in the second jhana, which has self-confidence and singleness of mind, that takes place in the absence of thinking and pondering, with joy and pleasure that are the result of his deepening samadhi, his collectedness of mind. In the first jhana, aside from joy and sukha and pamoja, that delightful, the nandi, that state of delight that we feel in the body especially, but the mind is very agitated because you're also able to think and ponder in the mind while this is going on. So there's a lot of chit-chat that you're having, a monologue even in the mind. Oh, this must be it. Oh, this must be it. Or this is it. This is it. Oh, it's very tumultuous. The mind is agitated. It's too like this, too much going on. It's too rattled, unsuitable for it to go anywhere beyond. In fact, they will drop out of it soon enough. The first, that is. But if the person, if the meditator sees what's going on and they relax, while also being aware that, oh, the teacher said, in order for me to move on to the next stage, I have to cut my attachment to this process called thinking, conceptualizing, pondering, and planning. This requires a lot of trust because you're stepping into the unfamiliar, unknown. So there's trust. Even in the first one, just to enter the first jhana, it's a process that requires a lot of trust because you've never had it before. So in the second one, it's the same process of trusting, but understanding the process. That's why we're going over these, and that's why the Lord Buddha taught the jhanas, that we relinquish thinking and pondering. And as a result, there's still pleasure. There's still joy, not as intense as it was in the first jhana, by the way. But this time, that state of happiness and joy and pleasure, it's very pleasurable, that we've gone beyond the seclusion, beyond the mere fact that we've secluded ourselves. Now, this is taking place because the samadhi is deepening. There's a distinction. In the first one, it was as a result of merely secluding ourselves, both physically, externally, and internally from the senses of pleasure. Now, his earlier perception of spiritual joy and the refined state of pleasure that arose from his seclusion ends and ceases, at which point, however, he becomes percipient of an even finer and subtler level of joy and pleasure that is now the result of his deepening samadhi. Thus, he becomes fully percipient of an even finer state of unmistakable spiritual joy, with pleasure and happiness, but which come forth from his collectedness of mind as he continues to train himself in this manner. Here again, great king, you have another fruit that brings far more undeniable benefits than the outcomes already mentioned. One that is gained by living the life of a recluse, an immediately visible fruit of recluseship that is observable right here and now. Tatiya jhana, the third jhana. Next, great king, with the detachment from and the fading away of joy itself, the bhikkhu remains in the comfort of equanimity, while being mindful and fully aware with pristine clarity, experiencing pleasure and happiness within the body, as he enters upon and remains in the third jhana, about which the noble ones declare, it is such a one indeed who is serenely mindful, abiding in happiness, with an ever-present sense of equanimity. Now here too, great king, his perception of the refined spiritual joy and state of pleasure that arose from his deepening samadhi also ends and ceases. But now he becomes percipient of the unmistakable state of equanimity. Thus, he becomes fully percipient of the unmistakably present state of equanimity as he continues to train himself in this manner. Here again, great king, you have another fruit that brings far more undeniable benefits than the earliest outcomes mentioned. One that is gained by living the life of a recluse, an immediately visible fruit of recluseship that is observable right here and now. There is a curiosity that's driving the person, the student, the practitioner. You want to know what's behind door number 2, number 3 in this case. But you cannot stay where you are, satisfied with where you are, locked in and concretized yourself, glued yourself in the second jhana, if you're still curious to go further, at which point you have to make a decision. Just like I did with the first one, second one, I wonder what will happen if I cross over. But you cannot do that unless you relinquish the things that you were enjoying. The quiet when there's no thoughts and pondering, no vitakka vichara, nothing like that. And then the intensity of the joy is going to be gone, by the way, as it's going less and less and less and less. For the sake of gaining something even more beautiful, and that is equanimity, upekkha. Upekkha is what you're preferring to taste more than the joy, because joy can be very boring. Eventually, you're going to have to give it up. Okay, pleasure. Okay, happiness. Okay, I get it. Staying in it. Okay, it becomes so blasé. You become so blasé and so like, and it's boring eventually for the wiser among us. But equanimity is where the path to panya lies. At that point, fearlessly the person gives up. Sometimes it's too much for them to trade equanimity for joy. Many times students jump back in to the second jhana because they want the action of joy. They interpret the brain, that is, the mind that likes action and enthusiasm and excitement, rather, prefers joy over equanimity because it presumes that equanimity is boredom, dull, uninteresting. That's why even within the jhanas, the person has to really be practicing Dhamma, understanding. Now, this is the Buddha's way, the Dhamma that he taught. Remember, the jhanas were used and taught by other religions at the time, other denominations or lineages. The Buddha Siddhartha's own teachers had been practicing, one up until the 7th, the other one up until the 8th. But the method that the Buddha is teaching here is completely different, because he's guiding us step by step to penetrate with insight. His goal is not jhana only, because jhana is only one wing. The other wing is Vipassana. First one, jhana, sometimes is a substitute for samatha, by the way. Calm, tranquility, meditation. So jhana is one wing, vipassana is the other. So bear that in mind. If you're pursuing simply the attainment of these subtler absorption states, you're not going to go far. You're going to get stuck and you're going to get stale and you're going to even lose what you had, just like Devadatta did. That's why even those who have truly, let's say, for benefit of a doubt, they did attain some jhanic states, because of their attachment to those states, they lose it and they make up stuff. And they do not penetrate the Dhamma at all, unfortunately. I've seen this, that's why I'm saying this, in individuals. Chatutha jhana, the fourth jhana. Afterwards, by giving up both pleasure and pain, and having already gone beyond joy and anguish, he remains in the continuous state of purifying mindfulness, with an ever-present sense of equanimity as he enters upon and abides in the fourth jhana, while experiencing neither pleasure nor pain, having now gone beyond both of them. The third jhana gave you a taste of upekkha, equanimity. Remember, even in the first jhana, there's a tinge of equanimity, but it's undetectable for most. Second has a little bit more because there's too much joy. By the third one, now you just tasted equanimity and just like, woo, slows you down. You're like, whoa, what is this? This is nice, but this is not joy. No. Something else is going on. Oh, I like this. Quiet, but there's nothing going on. Okay. But the fourth jhana drops you even more into that calm and tranquil, which is upekkha, a deeper level of upekkha. This is not the level of upekkha that is referred to in the Satta Bhujangas earlier I was mentioning in regards to samadhi. The seventh Satta Bhujanga, the 7 factors of awakening, is upekkha, and that is a much higher state. But you can't get there without having tasted this. So it's important. Here too, great king, his earlier perception of equanimity in its preliminary stage and grosser aspect also ceases, while at the same time he becomes percipient of an even more stable and balanced state of equanimity, a state where he is no longer touched by either pleasure or pain. Thus, he becomes fully percipient of the undeniable and directly experienced state of deeply balanced equanimity, as he continues to train himself in this manner. Continuously training himself in this manner. Important. You don't throw in the towel, as they say. You don't hang your, okay, I'm done. Kick your shoes off, as they say, and okay, we're good. We're fourth jhana. That's it. End of story. No. It's like somebody who's learning how to walk or run for the bigger race. Somebody who's learning to use their muscles with the physio, with the physical therapy sessions to regain or at least gain the ability to walk on a treadmill. But you're not going to walk on a treadmill for the rest of your life. There's the whole world waiting for you of experience to go ahead and explore by living, not on the treadmill. So these are also practice. Another way of understanding it, earlier I was saying they're way stations. They're definitely building for you the deeper samadhic muscles, if you will. Here again, great king, you have another fruit that brings far more undeniable benefits than the outcomes already mentioned. One that is gained by living the life of a recluse, an immediately visible fruit of recluseship that is observable right here and now. Attain, the 8 splendid knowledges. Here, Lord Buddha branches off. Usually, you would see him discuss what is sometimes called the fifth jhana, sixth, seventh, and eighth, right? It wouldn't benefit the king, in a sense. These are too subtle. You cannot even have any, they're intangible for him. But he's looking for, okay, what are the outcomes, right? The benefits. So he needs to highlight the process. Remember, Devadatta was Ajātasattu's first teacher, unfortunately, an evil teacher who misled him to the point where he killed his own father because of Devadatta. He was so impressed by his psychic abilities. So this is where Lord Buddha is guiding him properly through the process of what is the recluse really doing to deepen one's abilities, understanding, because understanding has to be there. And that's what Lord Buddha is going to talk about now. Because it's not about just showing off some abilities, some magical, extra, supernatural abilities. They come and go. Like it did with Devadatta, because he became terribly destitute. There was nothing left in him because he went against the Dhamma, because he made too big of a deal about those attainments, which he got thanks to his attainment of the fourth jhana and never anything beyond. But he lost those as well. And Ajātasattu saw that. So Lord Buddha is setting him on the right path, in other words. So here we have the 8 splendid knowledges, first of which is the vipassana jnana, knowledge with penetrative insight. Now this is Dhamma after the 4th week. Very important that we have that foundation, though. Now, when the bhikkhu's mind becomes thus collected and stable, well concentrated, bright in its purity, stainless, malleable, and wieldy, absent of any imperfections, flawless, unshakable, by having reached the state of imperturbability, he then directs it towards the attainment and experiencing of knowledge and vision. Then he is able to personally know, through direct understanding, how this body of mine is made up of material form, put together by the 4 primary elements that found their material origin thanks to a father and a mother, and are sustained by rice and porridge, kabalinkara, ahara, food, nourishment. That's how it's sustained, the body. After the sperm and the egg, the embryo, the zygote, it just grows, mitosis, and boom, you have a body, but you have to sustain it with food. Earlier, it was the blood of the mother in the uterus. And then it becomes, bigger and bigger and comes out. And now you need to sustain that with food. That's what the first part was. And because it is impermanent by nature, this body of mine is and will always be susceptible to being scraped, scratched, broken, subject to pressure, heat and cold, to rubbing and touching, and ultimately to being destroyed and dispersed. Moreover, this is the consciousness that is supporting it, whereby the body still exists right here and now, and to which it is tied to and bound. There's 2, twice I said 2 here. To which it is tied and bound. So the consciousness is key here. Okay? Otherwise, you have a dead body. Go ahead and feed the body as much as you want. It's dead. And that's why it's critical to have those 2. We call that also nama, rupa, and vijnana. In other suttas, you've seen us mention that. Like in the Mahanidana Sutta we've covered last year, I think. So this is the penetratingly the person, the practitioner is looking and seeing. He doesn't say, this is my body. He's looking, and so now you are, that's why it's called penetrative insight. You're unraveling these things that have been formed in your mind thanks to wrong view, because you have the idea of a compactness, ghana, sanya, the perception of compact thing, entity here in the body. Imagine, great king, there was a most brilliant emerald, the stone, precious stone, one that is of a superbly flawless quality, naturally beautiful, faceted on all 8 sides, finely polished to perfection, unblemished, translucent, and possessing all the excellent qualities of a precious gem. Now imagine how the radiance and liveliness of its natural colors become accentuated the moment someone strings it through a fine thread that is blue in color, or yellow, or red, white, or cinnamon. Then a man with very good eyesight would take it in his hand, and after carefully examining, would comment by saying, "Ah, this happens to be a most brilliant emerald, one that is of a superbly flawless quality, naturally beautiful, faceted on all sides, finely polished and to perfection, unblemished, translucent, and possessing all the excellent qualities of a precious gem, which has a blue, yellow, red, white, or cinnamon color string running through it." Now, great king, in just the same way, when the bhikkhu's mind becomes thus collected and stable, pay attention to this simile that he gave, the emerald, in connection to what he said earlier about the body, consciousness, penetrative insight. Remember. In just the same way, when the bhikkhu's mind becomes thus collected and stable, well concentrated, bright in its purity, stainless, malleable, and wieldy, absent of any imperfections, flawless, and having reached this state of imperturbability, he then directs it towards the attainment and experiencing of knowledge and vision. In this way, he is then able to personally know, through direct understanding, how this body of mine is made up of material form, rupa, put together by the 4 primary elements. We've covered those, right? Patavi, the earth or solidity, water, the fluidity, fire, heat, temperature, and fluctuations, changes in temperature. It could be cold, it could be hot. And air or wind element. You can think of it in terms of the body, the gaseous spaces, even in the body. Movement is another term for that, or pressure, rather. And because it is impermanent by nature, this body of mine is and will always be susceptible to being scraped, scratched, broken, subject to pressure, heat, and cold, to rubbing and touching, and ultimately to being destroyed and dispersed. Moreover, this is the consciousness that is supporting it, whereby the body still exists right here and now, and to which it is tied and bound. Here again, great king, you see another fruit that brings far more undeniable benefits than the earlier outcomes mentioned. The superior fruit that is gained by living the life of a recluse, an immediately visible fruit of recluseship, observable right here and now. Instead of saying, "Oh, I got, I scraped my elbow. Oh, I hit my knee. Oh, I have a terrible headache." When that happens, such a practitioner, when we say doesn't take it personally, that's too, I think even it's a lame answer. It's incomplete. It's very superficial to, almost accusatory, or it makes the person who's feeling the pain feel dismissed or something. We need to explain more as to what that means. Even when saying this is not me, this is not mine, this is not who I am, which is a term that we see a lot in the suttas, and many people teach it that way. But what does that mean for the person experiencing the headache? You keep saying that to yourself, the headache is not going to be gone. I guarantee it. Or the pain, you lost your leg. You're bleeding. No, it's not mine. It's, oh yeah, it's over there. Okay. There has to be penetration, using that moment to understand what just happened. Am I really being able to see rupa there? The 4 elements, am I seeing them there? 4 primaries. Because the connection, the glue, if you will, in this case, is the vijnana, the consciousness, that is still attached, that says, why me? Now people are suffering around the world. People have been suffering around the world in other realms as well, in the heavenly realms too. Many are saying that. Why me? Now the practitioner of Vipassana will say, at the very least, they will say, why not me? Because I am in this body that is made up of both material form of that realm, right? In this case, the human realm has these four elements, and a counterpart of that, which is the vijnana, the consciousness that is made aware of. It's infusing life into that, animating it, bringing it to life. Because of these things, there is a body. Plus, if I weren't there, if I didn't step on that landmine, it would not have blown up and blown me into bits. If I wasn't there, if I didn't walk through that door without opening making sure the doorknob works and it's open, I wouldn't step out of the glass door. A classmate of mine one time, and when I was in school, accidentally was playing basketball, and the ball went up into the inside of the foyer of where we were, and it went out the window. But he didn't see that. Right next to the window was a door. It was a glass door. In his excitement, because he was in the middle of a basketball game, he rushed up the stairs and went straight through the glass door. He didn't pay attention. He was all covered up in all these, imagine the wounds and all that. But he was okay. He didn't lose any, eyes or anything. Like his sight was okay. But it was a shattering sound. As wow. Had he not entered, or at least opened the door, he wouldn't have gone through the glass door and shattered it and injured himself. Sati is necessary here. Sati was necessary there. Sati is necessary everywhere in how we understand and process life. And this is another way of truly understanding what anatta means, because we have become mantra reciters oftentimes, even with the Dhamma. We throw these terms left and right. Yes, anicca, dukkha, anatta. Yes, anatta, that's anatta. Yes. What does that mean to me when I'm injuring myself? No, there has to be a deeper penetration, and it's not noting, walking. That's not vipassana either, the way I understand it. Because that's another form of a mantra. It's heavy. You're engaging in thinking and pondering again. You're not living at all. Next, mano mayidhi jnana, creating the mind-made body. Furthermore, great king, when the bhikkhu's mind is thus collected in the stability of samadhi, he then reflects with his heart, which is purified, without any blemishes, remaining malleable in an imperturbable state, while aiming it with focus at the creation of a mind-made body. Thus, as though pulling out from his heart, he extrudes and brings forth a fully fashioned copy of his own body. Thus, out of the body he inhabits, he creates another one, a mentally fashioned one. That's the mano, maya. That is fully mind-made, yet a body that is complete, with all its limbs intact and fully functioning mental and emotional faculties. Imagine, great king, how a man, on pulling out a reed from its very sheath, begins reflecting. This is the reed itself, and that is the sheath from where I pulled it. I know and see how they are not one and the same thing. After all, the reed is that which was extruded and pulled out from within the sheath itself. Or imagine another person, great king, who on drawing out his sword from its scabbard, begins to reflect, this is the sword itself, and that is the scabbard from where I drew it out. I know and see how they are not one and the same thing. After all, the sword is that which was extruded and pulled out from within the scabbard itself. Look how many examples the Buddha is giving, so that there is no misunderstanding of what he means. Unfortunately, people have belittled such teachings, such statements, and it's become almost like the domain of entertainment or Hollywood entertainment, Hollywood things, movies, I mean. Characters, actors, there's doubling of themselves. Well, all these come from, things that have been taught in other traditions as well, carried over from the Dhamma, like most of the Jataka stories or the teachings of the Dhamma, like the blind men and the elephant simile. The Buddha gave that example to the king, to the listeners in Udana, for example, but it's all over, at least the old cultures of Asia and elsewhere. It's even part of the lexicon of today's world of thinkers and philosophy to give that as an example. So similarly with these teachings, unfortunately, they have gone into almost like urban myths and things like that, or myth or magic, supernatural, without understanding the mechanism behind it. The Buddha used to practice this, do this. You see it many, many times where he disappears in one place and shows up in front of Venerable Ananda or Venerable Mahakassapa or Venerable Mahamoggallana, who was also very good at it. You had a perfect example of this with Venerable Chulapantaka some years ago, which we covered together. The one who was called the dumb Bhikkhu. He couldn't even memorize a single verse of Dhamma. But Lord Buddha helped him to practice focusing his mind, and he was able to accomplish that within a matter of an hour, where he even developed this ability. And just for fun, he became an Arahant, of course, and he had this ability, the ability which multiplies oneself. This is one of the typical examples that is described in the suttas. This is not a later development. This is not a cultural stuff added that has nothing to do. It has something to do with the Dhamma, because it's a natural progression. If the bhikkhu directs his chitta towards the accomplishment of this feat, because the mind is under control in the best way possible. It's malleable, it's wieldy. Of course, modern military entities would kill to just, but they kill all the time anyhow, right? To have this ability, to use it as a trick, to use it as a tool, as another weapon. No, this can never be a weapon. Like Devadatta, he tried it as a weapon and he lost it. And the Buddha gives another example so that the king understands what he means. Because he might think, oh, no, is he talking magic? How is that possible? The Buddha is explaining to him. Or imagine someone else, great king, who grabs a snake and pulls it out of its old skin. Then he begins reflecting. This is the snake itself, and that is the old skin from which I pulled out the snake. I know and see how they are not one and the same thing. After all, the snake is that which was extruded and pulled out from within its old skin. So in just the same manner, great king, when the bhikkhu's mind is thus collected and in the stability of samadhi, he then reflects with his heart, which is purified without any blemishes, remaining malleable and in an imperturbable state, while aiming it with focus at the creation of a mind-made body. That's why I said samadhi has also within it the focusing, the concentration aspect, but it's not just concentration. Thus, as though pulling out from his heart, he extrudes and brings forth a fully fashioned copy of his own body. Hence, out of the body he inhabits, he creates another one, a mentally fashioned one, and that is fully mind-made, yet a body that is complete, with all its limbs intact and fully functioning mental and emotional faculties. Later on, some writers in the early 20th century used this to describe this. Actually, they called it bilocation, or making multiple versions of yourself. It's not a hologram. That's why the Buddha is saying fully functioning. That means this body can behave, speak, and even think on its own, but they have their origin in the one that's here, the prototype. In fact, to use piggyback off of the mention of Venerable Chulapantaka, if you recall, I don't remember which week it was we covered it, but it was about 2 years ago, I think, maybe more, where the person who was inviting him to come to the lunch dana, where his brother had excluded him, he didn't count him as part of the participants, Sangha members, to go for this lunch dana. The Buddha, knowing this, he knew that Chulapantaka had become an Arahant. The person goes a few times back and forth because he's shocked the first time, because he discovers there's 1,000 copies of him. They're all the same Bhikkhu. They're all Chulapantaka. But he doesn't, he's confused. He runs back and he says, this is what's happened. And Lord Buddha calms him down and he says, go back and say, I'm here to, who is Chulapantaka, type of a thing. It's something like that. I'm here for Venerable Chulapantaka. And he says, the moment the first one says, I am, you touch their robe, grab their robe. And that's what the person does. Because there's so many of them and they're all the same. Each one is doing something else. One is, sweeping the floor, the grounds. The other one is sitting to meditate. The other one is speaking with the other, perhaps. Copies. And then the person comes and says, I'm here to see Venerable Chulapantaka. Who is Venerable Chulapantaka, Bhante? And the first one, the real Chulapantaka, says, I am. And he quickly grabs him, because the other ones are also saying, I am, before it turns into an echo, and all of them disappear. It almost sounds like a Hollywood fiction story, right? Movie, but it's not, because we see this example being taught so many times, and this is the method. The 4 jhanas that we went over, and Lord Buddha is giving us that. But why do we practice? It has to be serving a purpose. This is something that flows out of Arahantship. In fact, this is, if someone attains that, but prior to attaining Arahantship or Arahanthood, it becomes a big hurdle. That's why it's forbidden for bhikkhus to display such abilities if they have them. Forbidden. You will not see a bhikkhu getting on TV or on the internet saying, oh, look at me, I'm levitating. There goes that. It's impossible for that person to be a bhikkhu of this sasana. Here again, great king, you see another fruit that brings far more undeniable benefits than the earlier outcomes mentioned. Immediately visible fruit of recluseship that is observable right here and now. Idhividhanyana, ability to wield the various psychic powers. Now, this opens up the whole possibilities of different, more elaborate abilities, supernatural, if you want to call it, but it's not supernatural, because these are natural abilities. for a mind that has been trained to be, well, the word is malleable, wieldy, you direct it. That means the mind can never leave. You can't become distracted. That's why it has to be focused into singleness. Now, when the bhikkhu's mind thus becomes collected and stable, well concentrated, bright in its purity, stainless, malleable, and wieldy, absent of any imperfections, flawless, unshakable by having reached the state of imperturbability, while aiming it with focus and activating his psychic powers, he wields a plethora of psychic abilities that include, while being one, he becomes many, and then reverts back to being one again. Quickly. He moves without any obstructions through rocks and walls and other fortifications as if walking through space. He dives into the earth and comes out of it as though it were water. He walks on water without disturbing it, walking on it as if it were solid ground. He sits comfortably and flies through the air like birds of all sizes do, without any difficulty. He reaches and touches the moon and the sun, despite their mighty size and magnitude. Thus, with the psychic powers he wields, he is able to carry his body even as far as the Brahma realms without any difficulty. Great King, imagine an experienced potter or his top apprentice who takes a lump of fine quality and malleable clay and then starts molding it into whatever kind of pottery or shape he would want. Or, Great King, imagine someone talented at carving ivory pieces, or his number one apprentice who takes any kind of ivory and then begins shaping and carving it into whatever design he wants. Or, Great King, imagine an expert goldsmith or his experienced apprentice who takes a piece of gold and then fashions it into any kind of shape or design he may desire to. Now, in just the same manner, Great King, when the bhikkhu's mind becomes fully collected and stable, well concentrated, bright in its purity, stainless, malleable, and wieldy, absent of any imperfections, flawless, unshakable, by having reached the state of imperturbability, he then directs it towards activating his psychic powers as he wields a plethora of psychic abilities that include, while being one, so he repeats that. This also, Great King, is another fruit that brings far more undeniable benefits than the outcomes already mentioned, a superior fruit that is gained by living the life of a recluse, an immediately visible fruit of recluseship that is observable right here and now. Some people might roll their eyes, even so-called, Buddhists or secular Buddhists or atheist types, but these things do exist. Of course, simply because people are not developing those skills does not make the fact that they do occur obsolete. Okay? So it might seem like it dies out or becomes extinct simply because people aren't practicing it. Just like the Dhamma becomes extinct when people don't practice it. Medicine, if people don't practice it, doesn't mean that it is not there if for the person who's practicing. I remember from recent history, a contemporary of ours, Deepa Ma, she was from Calcutta, and she had been taught. Later on, she actually taught it to, I think, her sister as well, these techniques, which basically, when I say taught, it's the same teaching. So it's not like a secret book somewhere that, that's the usual typical mind to go ahead and, where can is there a magical book? Or no, it's right here. The thing that needs to be done, however, is the practice portion, real dedication into this skill. And there's the biography of her that was written some years ago. It's an interesting read. In it, there's mentions of this, as well as also in the her teacher's, I forgot his name, but he was a 10 preceptor. He wasn't a bhikkhu, nor a layman, but he was a dedicated practitioner, a noble disciple who taught her. And he also mentions this. Basically, she would do some of these, like levitate and things. And there's an account of her and her sister playing like house up in the air, and really seeing it, really being there, and people looking up at them, and they're just in the air, going through all these motions. Later on, they ask them how, because there's also the risk that people will treat you as a saint, as a god in some cultures, right? Because this is a unnatural ability. She says how she was doing all those things, like going through walls, or coming up from the ground, and she was, one time she came out of the ground and her hair was all wet, because going down into solid rock as if it's water. That really happens. So she was asked, and she said it's really has nothing to do with gaining a superior level of awakening. It's just a skill which requires a lot of concentration, she said, and it's annoying, she said, because eventually she lost it, the ability. She says, I can get it, but I just have to spend a few hours in seclusion really focusing the mind, and I'll have it again. But it's a chore. It's like, so what? And it's so flimsy, it's so flaky, it's so temporal. There's a story from the commentaries, I believe it was, a young man who he's an orphan. He's taken on by a bhikkhu who trains him as a novice, and they live in the jungle. One day, he's really developed in this, so to the point where he is able to fly, or just levitate, if you will. But his teacher always cautions him to practice his vipassana. He doesn't, because he's enjoying the fact that he's floating around in the canopy of trees in the forest. Until one day, when he's a teenager, puberty, he hears a female voice, goat herder's daughter. She's singing, and that makes him so get close to that. But even worse, he loses his concentration, whereby he falls. Imagine the height of the canopy of trees. I don't know how tall the trees were. And he injures himself badly. And he starts yelling, screaming for help. And his teacher gets there, and he tries to, take care of him. And he's badly injured, as you can imagine. So that's how flimsy, how unstable these things are. They come and go. They don't say much about the development of the person. However, in the case of the three higher knowledges that are attained by many an arahant, that comes naturally, post-arahanthood. That has to also be said. So these are part and parcel of the Dhamma, by the way. These are not extra things added later. Please bear that in mind. Okay, next we get to he says, this also great king is another fruit that brings far more undeniable benefits than the outcomes already mentioned. These are immediately visible fruits of recluseship, observable right here and now. Next is Dibbasota Jnana, knowledge of various psychic powers. Now, when the bhikkhu's mind becomes thus fully collected and stable, well concentrated, bright in its purity, stainless, malleable, and wieldy, absent of any imperfections, flawless, unshakable by having reached the state of imperturbability, while aiming it with focus, he activates his divine ear element. To this end, while possessing the divine ear, far surpassing that of the human in its strength and purity, he starts hearing the sounds of both heavenly and human beings, whether far or near. Great king, imagine a man traveling on the main road while witnessing the world around himself, who begins to hear the sounds of various drums, whether big or small, such as dhols, tablas, conches, udukkus, damarus. These are many of these are Indian, like tom-toms and different drums. Damarus, calls, nakkaras, or cymbals. He would then discern clearly and identify these various drums from the distinct sound each of them makes. He would know which one, what type of a drum. It doesn't take a genius, right? These are, cymbals that make very splashy sounds, and these are tablas, different sounds. So you're distinguishing. Now, in just the same manner, great king, when the bhikkhu's mind becomes fully collected and stable, well concentrated, bright in its purity, so he's mentioning that, he activates his divine ear element. To this end, while possessing the divine ear far surpassing that of the human in its strength and purity, he starts hearing the sounds of both heavenly and human beings, whether far or near. This also, great king, is yet another fruit that brings far more undeniable benefits than the outcomes already mentioned. Next is, some people might want me to say a few words on that. Well, it's when the mind is clear, when there is no noise, you've allowed it to become focused while practicing the jhanas proper. Because what the progression through the jhanas is doing is also training you to not be shaken, to not be jolted, not to drop out of those jhanas. That's why the practice is important, to really anchor yourself and learn how to establish yourself without any shakeup or anything that could really pull you out of that, despite the situation. And similarly, when the mind is that quiet and that malleable, focused, it all depends on where you want to direct it. And Dipasota, or the divine hearing, is you saying, I want to hear more, so it has a lot to do with your intentionality. I want to hear what is being said. And, across town, or at what my boss might be saying in the office about me. These are possible, of course. But why? That's the question I would like to ask. So it has to always serve the purpose of the Dhamma. Because if you're not ready, what if you hear the wrong thing? Things that you didn't want to hear. Your mind is gone. You're now tumultuous, you're agitated, you're probably angry. You want to go and kill the guy because, you don't have sila. So these are simply tools then, right? So they don't necessarily mean the person is highly spiritual either. In other traditions, in other religions, a person who does this, something like this unnatural or supernatural, we immediately build a statue of him or her and call it a saint or a god. And the Buddha is explaining there's no big deal about it. These are just like abilities, any abilities. It's like speaking Icelandic. I don't speak Icelandic. I hear it's one of the toughest languages, or Hungarian. But there's many, many people who speak it. The Devas experience this all the time. That's how they're able to hear and to listen to those who profess or proclaim that they do practice the Dhamma of Lord Buddha. They're always curious to find out whether you really are practicing. And they're not just listening to what words come out of your lips, but what thoughts are going on in your mind, in your heart. That also is part of that. Anyhow, Cheto Pariya Jnana, knowledge of the hearts and minds of others. That's where I was leading to. Now, when the bhikkhu's mind becomes thus collected and stable, well concentrated, bright in its purity, stainless, malleable, and wieldy, absent of any imperfections, flawless, unshakable, by having reached the state of imperturbability, he then aims it towards knowing the hearts and minds of other beings. What we normally use is term it as telepathy. To this end, he directly comes to know a heart that is full of lust as it truly is, clearly seeing it drenched in lust. Similarly, he directly comes to know a heart that is full of hatred as it truly is, clearly seeing it as it truly is, drenched in hatred. Similarly, he directly comes to know a heart that is full of delusion as it truly is, clearly seeing it as it truly is, drenched in delusion. Also, he directly comes to know a heart that is collapsing, or one that is sluggish, drowsy, and caving in, or driven to procrastination, as well as clearly seeing if the heart is distracted and pulled this way and that, being scattered and unstable in the presence of restlessness or worry. Also, he directly comes to know a heart that is in an exalted or lofty state as a result of meditative practice, and a heart that is still not yet developed to experience such sublime and lofty states. Also, he directly comes to know a heart that is in a mundane and surpassable state, clearly distinguishing it from a heart that is, in fact, unsurpassable. Also, he directly comes to know a heart that is in a concentrated and stable state, clearly distinguishing it from a heart that is, in fact, unconcentrated and unstable. And he directly comes to know a heart that is liberated and indeed released, while clearly distinguish it from a heart that is unliberated and still unreleased. Great King, imagine a young man or a woman who places a lot of focus on being and looking attractive, who, while putting on ornaments and jewelry, carefully examines their reflection through a flawless mirror or a bowl of clear water. Now, in the presence of a blemish on his or her face, such a person would immediately notice it and see that there is, in fact, the undeniable fact of a blemish on his or her face. And when seeing that there are no blemishes, that individual would again clearly discern that there is, in fact, no blemish to be found at all. Now, in just the same manner, Great King, when the bhikkhu's mind becomes fully collected and stable, well concentrated, bright in its purity, stainless, malleable, and wieldy, absent of any imperfections, flawless, unshakable, by having reached the state of imperturbability, he then aims it towards knowing the hearts and minds of other beings. Thus, he directly comes to know a heart that is full of lust, etc. So he repeats that section. But look at the images that Lord Buddha gave of a person who's looking at the mirror. In those days, it was very expensive, so only kings and wealthy people had mirrors, which was usually made of copper or some type of a metal, or a reflection of some type of a dark marble, or just for the common man, the mirror would be always the bowl of water, as long as it's not shaky or restless. So anyhow, let's say the person has such a tool and is looking at themselves, reflection. You would see it clearly. There's no persuasion necessary. Having this ability is the same as that. Undeniably there. You would know. You would know, just like the example I gave of you hitting your knee somewhere solid and it hurts. No one has to come and tell you, your knee is going to or is hurting because of this or something like that. No, you know it. Similarly, in the presence of someone who has a heart that is drenched in lust or hatred or delusion, if the person has that quality, that ability, they will see right through them. Even if the whole world doesn't. That's why so many people came trying to sneakily get in to this in front of the Buddha, or try to pretend they would say something, and they would sometimes try to flatter the Buddha. But in all from the outside, they might look like, oh, they're having a very emotionally, meaningful moment. The Buddha would see right through them, and he would call them out. He would say, even though your words might seem like they're coming from a good place, but I know you're just trying to flatter me. You mean none of it. You're not venerating me. You're not paying homage. You're not truthful, because I know what's in your heart. And people would be terrified or try to cover it up. So this is a quality, this is an ability that such a person would have. So again, he says, great king, this is another fruit that brings far more undeniable benefits, immediately visible, right here and now. Next, Ubbe nivasa bussati jnana, knowledge of the recollection of past lives. Now, when the bhikkhu's mind becomes thus collected and stable, well concentrated, bright in its purity, stainless, malleable, and wieldy, absent of any imperfections, flawless, unshakable by having reached the state of imperturbability, he then aims it towards recollecting and knowing the past lives and existences of himself and other beings. Thus, he recollects the manifold past lives he has lived in all their details and features. That is, 1 birth, 2 births, 3, 4, 5, 10 births, 20 births, 30, 40, 50 births, 100 births, 1,000 births, 100,000 births, many eons of world expansions, many eons of world contractions, many eons of world expansions and contractions, recalling them all in this manner. There I was so named, of such a family, with such an appearance. Such was my food and sustenance. Such were my experiences of pleasure and pain. One moment. Excuse me. Such was my lifespan, and after passing away from there, I was reborn elsewhere. And there too I was so named, of such a family, with such an appearance. Such was my food and sustenance. Such were my experiences of pleasure and pain, and such was my lifespan. And passing away from there, I was reborn here. In this manner, great king, the bhikkhu recalls his numerous previous lives and existences, in addition to their specific details and features. Great king, imagine there was someone who decides to travel from his own village and goes to another one. And later, after departing from that village too, he travels to yet another village. And once he finishes his touring, he finally returns to his native village. Now, great king, this man would start reflecting. Earlier, I was in my own village, but then I left as I traveled to the other village. While I was over there, I was standing there, then sat like that in such and such a place, talked and conversed with others in this way, while keeping quiet elsewhere. In that way, later, when I left that village, I went to the other one, where I sat on such a seat, stood in such a place, while communicated with those around me in this or that manner, and remained silent on such occasions. It was only after that when I decided to return to my native village. Now, in just the same manner, great king, when the bhikkhu's mind becomes fully collected and stable, while concentrated, bright in its purity, stainless, malleable, and wieldy, absent of any imperfections, flawless, unshakable by having reached the state of imperturbability, he then directs it towards recollecting and knowing the past lives and existences of himself and other beings. Thus he recollects the manifold past lives he has lived in all their details and features. That is, 1 birth, etc. So that's a repeat. There I was so named. So the person knows, just like if somebody came to you at the end of a busy day that you've lived through, work, this, that, and you give them a report. They say, where were you in the morning? Where did you wake up? Where, were you in your house? Yes. What did you do? What did you eat? I did this. What did you dress up in? What was your outfit like? And then what did you do? Oh, I took the bus, or I took the train, or I took my car. Okay, which train did you take? Which bus? Which roads did you take while driving or walking? You would tell them. And whom did you come across? Did you speak with someone? Yes, I went and bought, this. I went and bought some flowers for the office, or for, my colleague whose birthday it was today. And then we went for lunch. And then what happened? And I did this, and then I did that, and then I went to work, and then I did this. It's the same thing. You're just recalling details that you have lived. You're not conjuring up anything, which is what we see happen a lot in the name of, in many cases, sadly, past life regression. Now, remember, if done correctly, these are valid. But oftentimes, depending on who the person is that is being past life regressed, because many people have their own bag of issues that they carry. Their likes, dislikes, and imagination plays a huge role, especially with certain children or even adults, of course, where there's another motive, just like I was mentioning about meditation students who would go to the teacher with their own interpretations or even agendas or fake information or just fantasy. That does not make, simply because it's coming out of their mouth or in a certain arena or situation, that it must be truly their past life that they're reporting on. Not necessarily, because the mind has to be adequately quiet, trained. It's very important. Because what happens is, this was happening a lot with children, with you had individuals who were telling the person, just like in the case of a court situation, in the law, where a person is being on a witness, serving as a witness on the stand, and an attorney can come and can have you say certain things the way they want you to say them to get a certain outcome. That is also something that people were doing with children, to point out that these children were definitely sexually abused, for example, or they've experienced some traumatic events when there was none. That person grew up and later on came out and said, and this was not a singular example, there were many people like this. Meanwhile, there was so much devastation caused by such a report, which was admissible in courts of law. And many innocent people were hurt, damaged, families were broken up because of the overzealous ways that people wanted to play with individuals' words to get a certain outcome. That's lying. That's deception. So we have to be careful of that as well, because sometimes we do this. I've seen this happen. When there's no evidence of this and it's not past life, the person's fantasy is playing. Often that's the case. So being aware of this. This also, great king, is yet another fruit that brings far more undeniable benefits than the outcomes already mentioned, a superior fruit that is gained by living the life of a recluse, an immediately visible fruit of recluseship that is observable right here and now. Next, Dibba Chakku Jnana, knowledge of the passing away and reappearance of beings. Dibba Chakku is usually used as the other aspect of Dibba Sota, vice versa. Divine, Chakku means eye. Dibba is the Pali word for divine in this case. Knowledge of passing away and reappearance of beings. Now, when the bhikkhu's mind becomes thus fully collected and stable, well concentrated, bright in its purity, stainless, malleable, and wieldy, absent of any imperfections, flawless, unshakable, by having reached a state of imperturbability, he then aims it towards knowing the death and rebirth of beings into the various realms. So the person now with such a mind, directed and asking with the intention to know. And so the clarity and the purity of the heart of the questioner is extremely important, as well as the mind, of course, to be able to see it. So you can't have agendas there as to preferences as to what you want to see. The same thing with the Dibba Sota and the others. To this end, with the divine eye, which is pure and far superior compared to those of human and other beings, he applies the psychic power of knowing the destination of beings as they die and reappear into the different realms of existence. Thus, he sees clearly all types of beings dying at the end of life, whether being reborn into exalted or miserable states, beautiful or ugly, fortunate or unfortunate, witnessing this by directly seeing and therefore understanding clearly how beings pass on to different states according to their actions, whereby he knows that beings who behave badly through their bodily actions, their speech, and their mental actions, being disrespectful towards the noble ones, while grasping onto their wrong views and on account of their wrong views in action, with the breakup of the body after death, they are now reborn in a state of misery, utter deprivation, and a bad destination in evil states and in the hells. But these worthy beings who behaved virtuously through their bodily actions, their speech, and their mental actions, being respectful towards the noble ones, being right in their views, and on account of their right views in action, with the breakup of the body after death, they are now reborn in a state of happiness, in a good destination, even in the heavenly world. Thus, with the divine eye, which is far superior to those of human beings and other animals, the Bhikkhu clearly sees beings dying at the end of their life and how they are reborn into either exalted or miserable states, beautiful or ugly, fortunate or unfortunate, witnessing this by directly seeing and therefore understanding clearly how beings pass on to different states according to their actions. Great King, imagine that right where there is a major crossroad of four paths meeting, there was a mansion built in the central square. Then someone with excellent eyesight climbs up to the highest level of that mansion and begins looking at the people moving about in this and that direction, all in full view to his clear and unobstructed vision. What an incredibly simple, beautiful simile that captures it. Imagine you're getting up on top of a mansion in the middle of a junction, in the middle of a piazza or a square, and you're looking and you're seeing whichever way you want to look. You just turn your gaze and direct it. You see what is there in your line of sight. Nothing is hidden from you. That's perfect of an example that the Buddha is giving, as always. Now, in just the same manner, Great King, when the Bhikkhu's mind becomes fully collected and stable, well concentrated, etc., he then directs it towards knowing the death and rebirth of beings into the various realms. To this end, with the divine eye, which is pure and far superior compared to those of humans and other beings, he applies the psychic power of knowing and the destination of beings as they die and reappear to the different realms of existence. And then he repeats that section by seeing how these beings behave badly, and that through word, through body and mind, and because of that, they ended up in the lower realms, especially in the hell realms. And those who have not and had proper right view, and they engaged by understanding of karmic laws and lived generously and with good, clean heart, they are reborn into states of happiness. I'm paraphrasing here because it's a long paragraph, as you know. Even into the heavenly realms or worlds. Remember, it's easier, far easier to drop into the hell realms than it is to be reborn into the heavenly realms. It's not like all I have to do is have a good wish and do a few good deeds and we're good to go. It's not like individuals who are, who believe firmly in the born again concept, born again Christians and people like that, or anybody who says, oh, I've done this, so I'm good to go. I have the visa in my hand and the ticket, so I'm good to go. There's no such thing as far as the Dhamma is concerned, because it's work. You have to, just like you're breathing. If you stop breathing, you die. So you can't be wholesome, behaving in skillful, beneficial, helpful manner, constructive manner on one day or in one part of the day, and the rest of the day you're not, and expect that you're going to be in a heavenly realm. No. In the suttas, I forgot if it was in the Samyutta Nikaya or the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical or the connected discourses, where the Buddha says it's far more difficult. So he's doing it gradually to explain the magnitude of this for beings to drop into hell realms. To drop into animal realm is more difficult than in the hell realms. Just live with the default mode. Go ahead and do whatever it comes to you. Destroy, steal, live with passion, live with greed, live with having enjoyment of experiencing your senses constantly, not training the mind, not caring how another person feels, having opportunities to support and help those who deserve to be supported and helped, speaking in quasi-truthful ways, or strategic communication, as the modern language is saying for lying, and expect to land somehow miraculously even in the human realm, because the Buddha says it's so difficult to be born as a human. That's why most beings, especially now, when they die, they're ending up in hell, not even in the animal realm, by the way. That gives you an idea as to why some animals are going extinct. Because you don't even have good beings deserving to be born as a rhinoceros, or as iguanas, or as some type of a bird. Why? Because people have allowed their lower tendencies to dominate. People have become so selfish, so miserly, so stingy, so dishonest, so me, and what's in it for me? I want to enjoy life type of a thing. Well, that's the surest way you're going to end up in hell. Because there's inconsideration. Because you're just enjoying what you have, whether it's physical, carnal, or actual financial, the way the world is being run. Now, they're dragging us to World War III. All these people are ending up in hell. No, don't make any mistakes about that. No matter whatever they believe, it doesn't matter at all. And it's so difficult to be reborn in a heavenly realm. That's why the Dhamma is there. That's why compassion is key. That's why honest living is key. That's why speaking truthfully is absolute must. Years ago, when I came across the statement by the Buddha saying that even lying gets you to hell. Well, what if the person is a generous person, gave away his whole kingdom, but has a tendency of lying here and there? Sorry. Imagine a person who lies, they can do anything, the Buddha says. Any horrific thing, because lying is the thing, is the crack in the dam. So if you want to end up in the heavenly realms, stop lying, deceiving, especially to yourself. There's not enough camouflage, not enough makeup, not enough good deeds to hide a lie. The best way is to come out clean. And promise yourself, I'm never doing it again. Because I don't like to be lied to myself, so why should I lie to anyone else? Okay, let's go ahead with that. Okay, so now you're changing your trajectory from the lower realms to the higher realms. So it's not like the heavenly realms are a dime a dozen, there where you can just drop in after the end of your life because you had some good thoughts or you remember a verse from the Dhamma and that's it. Not enough. This also, great king, is yet another fruit that brings far more undeniable benefits than the outcomes already mentioned. And remember, in today's world, unfortunately, the Dhamma has been so watered down that even talk about the 31 realms of existence has become, in many circles, taboo or outdated, not important, culturally tinged, stained, all of which are adhamma, all of which make the person who teaches such things, such poisons, an agent of Mara in the name of a bhikkhu or Dhamma, so-called teacher, which we have plenty of today. Every day there's hundreds more coming out. Apparently, everybody's a Dhamma teacher, presenting their own version of the Dhamma. That's one of the fastest ways to end up in hell, by the way, to misrepresent the Dhamma. Fastest way. And that's why hell has, a lot of so-called Dhamma teachers, sadly. The first of which was Devadatta, remember? Next, asavakaya jnana, knowledge of the destruction of the heart's contaminants. This is the signature of an Arahant. None of the others. This has to be there. Now, when the bhikkhu's mind becomes thus collected and stable, well concentrated, bright in its purity, stainless, malleable, and wieldy, absent of any imperfections, flawless, unshakable by having reached a state of imperturbability, he then aims it toward the knowledge of the destruction of the heart's contaminants, the asavas. Thus he comes to directly know and unmistakably see this is suffering. He comes to directly know and unmistakably see this is the origin and arising of suffering. He comes to directly know and unmistakably see this is the very cessation of suffering. He comes to directly know and unmistakably see this is the path itself that leads to the ending of suffering. Furthermore, he comes to directly know and unmistakably see these are the asavas, the heart's contaminants. He comes to directly know and unmistakably see this is the origin and rising of the asavas. He comes to directly know and unmistakably see this is the very cessation of the asavas, the heart's contaminants. He comes to directly know and unmistakably see this is the path that leads to the ending of the asavas, the heart's contaminants. Thus, by seeing and understanding the truth of this, the bhikkhu is then fully released from the contaminant of sensuality, kamasava. Similarly, he is fully released from the contaminant of becoming, bhavasava. And he is fully released from the contaminant of ignorance, avijjasava. These are the three asavas, the contaminants. They're the deepest. They're the source, if you will, of the defilements. And by knowing viscerally for himself and beyond the shadow of a doubt, no one's telling him this, by the way. He knows this. He comes to the very unmistakable and unprecedented realization, it is now finally released indeed. Thus, he attains to the noble end of the holy life, as he finally understands it for himself in this very birth, in the here and now, knowing it for sure with direct understanding that birth is now finally destroyed. The holy life has been fully lived with its goal achieved. There is no more coming back to any state of existing. Imagine, great king, there was a pool of water in a secluded place that was pristine and clear, utterly pure and with perfect visibility all the way down to its bottom. Then, someone with excellent eyesight standing at the edge on the dry land looks down into the water, being able to clearly see the different shells, pebbles, and rocks of various colors, as well as schools of fish, swimming and comfortably living and frolicking in it. Now, that man would start thinking to himself, This lovely pool in this secluded place is so pristine and clear, utterly pure and with perfect visibility all the way down to its bottom, whereby, while I stand at its edge and on dry land, looking down into it, I can clearly see the different shells, pebbles, and rocks of various colors, as well as schools of fish swimming and comfortably living and frolicking in it. Now, in just the same manner, great king, when the bhikkhu's mind becomes fully collected and stable, well concentrated, bright in its purity, stainless, malleable, and wieldy, absent of any imperfections, flawless, unshakable by having reached the state of imperturbability, he then directs it towards the knowledge of the destruction of the heart's contaminants. To this end, given the work he has already done, his heart is fully released. Now, this also, great king, is a fruit that brings far more undeniable benefits than the outcomes already mentioned. A superior fruit that is gained by living the life of a recluse, an immediately visible fruit of reclusehood that is observable right here and now. In fact, great king, there is no higher fruit than this that could ever be attained or gained from living and practicing the life of a recluse. Truly magnificent, and the highest fruit that is gained by living the life of a recluse. An immediately visible fruit of reclusehood that is observable right here and now. That's the epitome of living the life of a recluse. The highest fruit. Everything else pales. That's why there is the holy life. That's why we practice. That is the goal. Nothing else. Nothing less. Not even the heavenly birth. None of those things are the epitome. There's no delay. There's no, well, let me go into a heavenly realm. Let me come back 1.5 million times and then, do good deeds, and then finally I will end up being an arahant. No, all that is you being the agent of Mara against yourself. That's why I'm totally against the whole bodhisattva vow thing, which is and will always be and was the work of Mara in the guise of Dhamma. Because it delays. There is no delay acceptable by the Buddha. And if it wasn't acceptable by the Buddha, why is it acceptable by us? This is your life. Make use of it to reach the highest fruit of the holy life. That is the message of Lord Buddha here. Nothing else. Last section. Ajātasattu pasakatta pativedana. King Ajātasattu declares himself an upasaka. Then, on having carefully listened to what the Blessed One just said, King Ajātasattu exclaimed by uttering these words, "It is marvelous, it is truly wonderful. Master Gautama has clarified the Dhamma in many ways, as though he were to turn upright what had been turned upside down, revealing what was hidden, showing the way to one who was lost, holding up a lamp in the dark for those with eyesight to see. Bhante, I go to the Blessed One for refuge, and to the Dhamma and to the Sangha of Bhikkhus. May the Blessed One accept me as his lay disciple who has taken refuge in him from today until the end of life. Blessed Lord, I have made a terrible mistake." This is his confession. Remember, he's the one who had killed his father, and he was living with that bitter wound in his heart. And he had not spoken this to anyone. And he is now openly, publicly putting himself out there and declaring it. Everybody knew it. Everyone in the court knew it. I have made a terrible mistake, a gigantic fault that was utterly foolish and inhumane, committing an entirely wrong and evil action by any standard. So terribly foolish of me that for the sake of gaining full control over the kingdom, I have killed my own father. Someone who was truly the ideal ruler, a kind and loving father, and a wise king who lived and practiced according to the Dhamma. He was a noble disciple, King Bimbisara. He was one of the very first noble disciples. He was Sotapanna. Please, O blessed Lord, kindly accept my heartfelt apology. Please forgive me for this terrible crime that I committed, Bhante. I was short-sighted, rash, gullible, and completely driven by self-interest. I shall no longer behave in such a manner in the future. This I promise to you, blessed Lord. And the Blessed One replied by saying, truly, great king, you did indeed make a terrible mistake, a gigantic fault that was utterly foolish and inhumane, by committing a completely wrong and evil action by any standard. And it surely was terribly foolish of you, where, for the sake of gaining full control over the kingdom, you killed your own father, someone who was truly the ideal ruler, a kind and loving father and a wise king who lived and practiced according to the Dhamma. Remember, many other kings came to the Dhamma because of King Bimbisara. He was the one who would send messages to other kings. Once he saw the Dhamma, he couldn't keep it to himself. And that's what happens. That's how he sent back messages, gifts back and forth with King Pukkusati, which later on we saw, who relinquished his crown based on the messages and the instructions on the Dhamma, the Noble Eightfold Path that King Bimbisara sent to him. He relinquished. He was like so blown away because this is so beautiful. He said, how can I continue being a king? This is Pukkusati. And he started meditating based on whatever little that he was able to extract. He didn't know any Dhamma. He didn't have any bhikkhus. He didn't have any bhikkhus around. He secluded himself, and eventually he just came out and he says, I relinquish my throne. And he went and walked. And it was to him, for him, that the Buddha had walked about 350 miles to go and teach him the Dhamma. Then he became an anagami that night. Pukkusati. It was all because of King Bimbisara. And that was only one example. However, given that this is Lord Buddha responding to Ajātasattu. However, given that you accepted responsibility for your evil action, which is the appropriate thing for you to do now, and furthermore, you are able to see the severity of your mistake and the harm you have caused, and thus now realize your mistake and are remorseful, never to engage in such behavior ever again, through restraint, your apology is therefore accepted. After all, when a wrongdoer realizes his mistake and seeks to move beyond it by becoming transformed entirely because of it, and genuinely promising and working to never repeat it, then that certainly leads to growth. Not just for himself, but for this entire dispensation. It's because it is through restraint that one develops and deepens one's understanding while achieving success in this training of the noble ones. Remember, King Ajātasattu was burning in pain. That was the original question that was driving him. Remember, when he asked Jivaka, please take me to your teacher. Will he help alleviate my pain and suffering in my heart that doesn't go away? And what did Jivaka say? He says, if anyone can do it, it's my teacher, Lord Buddha. And here we see he now was Ajātasattu's teacher as well, because he offered his position as a lay disciple to him, as an upasaka. And now we see Ajātasattu respond. Then, hearing these words spoken to him by the Blessed One, King Ajātasattu replied by saying, "And now, Bhante, we must take leave of you, for we have many responsibilities to attend to. In that case, feel free to do whatever you must do, great king." That's Lord Buddha's response. Thus, King Ajātasattu, and having listened delightedly to the words spoken to him, agreeing and approving of whatever the Blessed One had said, arose from his seat and with his hands in Anjali, paid homage again to the teacher as he respectfully circumambulated the Blessed One by keeping him to his right side before setting off back to his royal court. Right after King Ajātasattu of Magadha departed, the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus around him by speaking these words: "Bhikkhus, truly sad is the situation for the king, for he is indeed ruined, having so severely injured himself by destroying such a great opportunity. This because, had he not killed his own father, who was truly the ideal ruler, a kind and loving father, and a wise king who lived and practiced according to the Dhamma, then the very eye of Dhamma would have arisen in him immediately, right where he was sitting in front of us, before he would have got up to leave." King Ajātasattu could have easily attained Nibbana, at least the very first stage. At least. Remember the great fortune to be born at the time when a Buddha is alive, or just when the dispensation of a Buddha is available, like us. It's still here. We're as if we're there, right? Almost. The Dhamma is here. We're hearing it. That's a huge, great fortune, which we don't give enough credit to ourselves, that we have toiled and struggled, done so many wonderful good deeds to be here, and the intention to want to pursue the Dhamma. Everyone who listens to this, who's watching this, who's hearing this, at whatever time, you've done this. It's you. Your intention to pursue the Dhamma has brought you here, as it had brought Ajātasattu. Unlike him, we have a chance. But even in his case, imagine, he is sitting, forget about the royal pomp and all that, he's sitting with 500 elephants, 500 wives and consorts, all these things, so much military presence, his advisors, everybody's there, everybody's just waiting for him to say something. That's how afraid they are of him as the king. But he's in the presence of 1,251 Arahants. When was the last time you actually were in the presence of a single Arahant? Or we? Imagine the immensity of his good fortune to be born at a time, and he's in the presence of. He willfully went there in the middle of the night, you know. That says a lot about his past also, in wanting to pursue the Dhamma. But his proclivities, his conceit, his craving for power, and to be gullible, basically not taking responsibility to decipher as to what he's hearing, whether it makes sense, or listening to his greed, possibilities of more power and this and that, lies that Devadatta fed him. But his willingness to go along with it ended up ruining his chances. That's what Lord Buddha means by ruined himself. Why ruined? He's a king. And now he has learned the Dhamma, but he will not be able to penetrate. That's why Lord Buddha says he could have easily attained nobility. He could have easily had the Dhamma Chakku, which is a term for someone who sees the Dhamma, meaning at the very least a Sotapanna, a stream winner, someone who's entered the stream of Dhamma. It's impossible for them to fall into the lower realms. Impossible. And at the most, they have 7 more lives to go. that was not going to be Ajātasattu's fate, future. So we would like to think that he did not end up in hell after his death, and that he has attained in another life. We don't know. But what is understood, that he did not make the most of this opportunity. But thanks to him, in a sense, we also have this sutta, because he approached and he asked Lord Buddha this question on Sāmaññaphala, the fruits of reclusehood. And let us finish the sutta here. This is what the Blessed One said. Meanwhile, the bhikkhus were delighted in witnessing and listening to the Blessed One's words, remaining fully contented. Here ends the Sāmaññaphala Sutta. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. A moving sutta, as you can tell. Dhamma is beautiful in its beginning. It is beautiful in its middle, and it's beautiful in its end. So, but let us do more than Ajātasattu. Let us be more. Let us go all the way in whatever comes difficult. Why we pull ourselves away from really dedicating ourselves to the Dhamma proper. Because each of us has an idea, but we never go there as to what it would be the optimum dedication to the practice. Be it sila, carrying sila with you throughout the day more than you do normally. When you have sati, to have it with you, sila, virtue, in whatever you do, avoiding the companionship of certain people that bring adhammic influence in your life, even if you do not participate. Fear, if there's fear inside of you, to really delve deeper in yourself and go all the way. This is a courageous path. That's why most people will not be interested in it. Ajātasattu said, okay, I got what I want, and I got my, in a sense, confession done, and I received my apology, accepted, basically. My apology was accepted. I was forgiven, and now I can go and live my life. You know, as an upasaka. Okay. But each of us could have handled it, I think, slightly different. After all that, you wouldn't say, I have things to do, Bhante, now I have to go. What things? What things? Improve your chances. You just killed your father, you know, a few years ago. Is this it? So the desire to know more, to live according to the Dhamma, was not there for him. Not even close to what his father had. So there's so much to pick out from the sutta, as you know. But I will pause here and see if there are any questions, comments you may have. Don't be shy. Well, if there aren't. Okay. Let us transfer some merits. Akāsatthā ca bhūmatā devānaga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu loka sāsanam. Akāsatthā ca bhūmatā devānaga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha Chubumata Devanagamahitika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mam Paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May the merits of this, having us attended to the sutta, paid attention to the Dhamma, whatever merits that may have accrued from this, the sharing of Dhamma, the opportunity to hear the Dhamma, the ability to be able to physically be healthy and well to hear the Dhamma and ponder it, practice it. Whatever merits that may have accrued, may it be shared by all those beings who are in pain, especially now in the world today, who are living in fear, who don't know what will happen next, who have lost loved ones, mother and father, husband, wife, sister, brother, uncle, aunt, child, daughter, son. And all the disarray, all the anguish, the terrible, suffocating anguish that they feel. All these beings, may they fully receive and enjoy the benefit of whatever merits we have accrued in all our journeys throughout Samsāra in practicing the Dhamma. Whatever merits that we may have accrued, may they benefit fully, so that their pain becomes less, their suffering becomes less, to the point where their hearts clear up and go beyond greed, hatred, and delusion, developing the eye of Dhamma one day to overcome Samsāra once and for all. With that, we'll conclude today's exploration. If you have any questions, you may send them my way. I'll do my best. And on a different note, last night I was able to finish finally the Italian narration of the manual of the book. After months and months of working and narrating, and with the help of Kisa Gautami, who helped present, for me not to make that many mistakes in Italian pronunciation. And already we're getting some input from individuals who are very glad who are Italian. So it's quite lovely surprise. So it's uploaded on YouTube, as well as the PDF of it is updated version, edited version of the book is also available. So that's a wonderful opportunity that has come to fruition. So I wanted to share that with you. The continued work is there for the finishing of the Anguttara Nikaya, the 11 volumes, the 11 books, and we are diligently working on making that. Right now it's in the proofreading stage, and so looking forward to having that be available in the future, hopefully sooner than later, freely available for everyone who's interested in having them. 11 books. And so all of which could not have been done without the support of the devas, as well as all the lay supporters. And who still provide, thankfully, to keep this body alive, this fickle body, unreliable body. So whatever merits to be gained are shared with you and all the supporters, human and non-human, and especially those who are in pain, who are in suffering. May this world heal from this crazy adhammic stage that we're going through. May the good come back to this world. And it is coming back every time you have a moment of sati and sila. You yourself. It makes a huge impact to the very fabric of this planet. The energy field changes when you have a moment of sati. Please do not underestimate, undermine the importance of it, your practice. So, with that, I'll see you next week. Sukhi hot.